Welcome to Duck Season Somewhere podcast. This episode is brought to you by the following sponsors. GetDucks.com, your proven source for the very best waterfowl hunting adventures. Argentina, Mexico, 6 whole continents worth. For 2 decades, we've delivered real duck hunts for real duck hunters. And USHuntlist.com, because the next great hunt is closer than you think. Search our database of proven U.S. and Canadian outfits. Contact them directly with confidence. Trust is earned. By the numbers, 121 waterfowl subspecies bagged on 6 continents, 20 countries, 36 U.S. states, and growing. I spend upwards of 225 days per year chasing ducks, geese, and swans worldwide. And I don't choose shotguns for their brand name or the cool factor. Y'all know me way better than that. I've shot Benelli for over 2 decades. I continue shooting Benelli shotguns for their simplicity, utter reliability, and superior performance. Whether hunting near home or halfway across the world, that is the stuff that matters. Sit means sit and stay until it doesn't. No matter how well or how often trained, retrievers want those ducks as badly as we do, maybe even more. Chardog might be titled, but she's still just a dog. I'm over 50 years old and I still do dumb stuff, trust me. Retrievers are family. I wouldn't endanger my children near heavy traffic, and I'm not going to risk my dog jumping in front of blazing guns either. Gundog Outdoors' patented quick-release safety system is fully adjustable, tethers to any blind or stand, has titanium stakes for frozen ground, and a quick-release marine-grade shackle to quickly release Fido when the smoke clears. Visit gundogoutdoors.com. Connect with them on Instagram at Gundog Outdoors to see their growing line of Gundog safety and performance products. Enter hashtag GetDucks to receive 15% discount off of your first order. Boss Shot Shell's copper-plated bismuth tin alloy is the good old days again. Steel shots come a long way in the past 30 years, but will never, ever perform like good old-fashioned lead. Say goodbye to all that gimmicky, high recoil, compensation, science, hype, and hello to superior performance. Know your pattern, take ethical shots, make clean kills. That is the boss way. The good old days are now. It really is duck season somewhere for 365 days per year. Duck Season Somewhere takes me year-round to worldwide destinations where I visit with the most interesting people. I'm your host, Ramsey Russell. Join me here to listen to those conversations. Welcome back to another episode of Duck Season Somewhere. I'm still in Arizona. Today's guest is part 2, John Odell, Arizona DNR. If you listened to last week's episode, I know y'all were just as fascinated as I am. I mean, here we are smack in the middle of the Sonora Desert, and where 3 other deserts converge, and it's some of the richest hunting, small game hunting in the United States. High biodiversity, surprisingly good duck hunting at times, good species diversity. But anyway, thank y'all for joining us again. John, how are you?
I'm awesome.
Good. You know, last week we ended talking about the about Yuma, Arizona dove hunting, and I definitely added that to my bucket list. I can tell you the next first day of September that I'm not traveling somewhere, I will be in Yuma. I really look forward to fitting in with that.
I can tell you honestly, that is my Super Bowl. As a biologist, as the Migratory Game Bird Coordinator for Arizona,
Super Bowl.
That day is my Super Bowl.
It is like the dove hunt. And to me, dove hunting is such a tradition of people, and you know, it's like I've always said, my last meal supper type hunt in the world would be opening day of dove season. Yeah. It's hot in Mississippi, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter. It's just the pageantry, the people, the food, the tradition, the ritual of it.
Yeah, and I mean, I think people experience this in different ways in other states. Like, I've been to opening day of deer in Alabama. That was amazing. Like, I was blown away at what that looks like and entails, you know. People in the woods and deer drives, and I mean, just like I was overwhelmed. Like, I thought it was one of the coolest things. And so, if you're in a state, I mean, there's something, there's something that goes on that's kind of the cultural phenomenon in hunting for you. What maybe that's the opening day of pheasant in South Dakota, or we all experience it just a little different here in Arizona. For me, man, I'm telling you what, September, like you can feel it's electric in the air down here, and not only like just hyperbole, it's literally electric. Like we're in the middle of monsoon season, so we have these crazy lightning storms, major rainstorms, going on, and the humidity's high, and the cicadas start, really buzzing, and that's all to me like signals. Okay, it's coming. September 1's coming. Like this is the build up to the whole thing. Because and guys, literally, we've gone through the summer here. There's not a lot of reasons to drag you out of your air-conditioned house in Arizona in the summer. And other than, you can go fish and get out on the lake or whatever, but like, for the diehard hunter, man, they look forward to September 1st so bad because, man, I get it. Go out, bust out the shotgun. It's going to be warm. We know it. Make sure to dress comfortably, put on some sunscreen. We've had some hot days. Sometimes the doves are even cooked before they hit the ground. But it's the day. And September 1st, it's always been the unofficial start of the fall hunting season. We have a few, like we have pronghorn hunts that start maybe in August or whatever, but like this to most people, like this is the unofficial start for the fall hunting season. So they just can't wait for that day, to arrive. And you get together with friends, you go shoot a bunch of birds, clean them up, throw some on the grill, make some poppers, just enjoy that time. Cause it's Labor Day weekend too. I mean, that's the whole thing. Right. September 1st has been the opener in Arizona and California for over 100 years. That day it has always been September 1st. I'm not man enough to suggest changing that opening day. Well, it's the first day that we can open, any migratory bird season across the country, according to the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. So, we have stuck to September 1st. Even before there was a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and a Migratory Bird Treaty Act, it was still September 1st.
A lot of the same things could be said about the opener in Mississippi. I swear I was a teenager before I realized that Labor Day weekend was a federal holiday, that it was not the Monday we get out of school to go shoot doves. It's just my tradition. And I was in Texas one time. During one of their openers down around El Campo. And it was, and I just thought there was a lot of dove hunters around the Double Quicks in Mississippi till I went to a Buc-ee's in Texas on 4:30 in the morning opening day. And when I read somewhere, facetious or not, that the largest armed militia on earth was Texans on opening day of dove season, from what I've seen, I believe it.
Yeah. They have a million
now,
hunters.
Right about the time I think I've seen and done practically everything there is, what I love about my jobs, what I love about this duck season somewhere, rolling around and meeting people like yourself. All of a sudden, I found out that the greatest dove hunt in the United States, if not the world, is right there in Yuma, Arizona.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I've got to go. I've got to experience that.
Yeah. I will say, I mean, I've watched the Argentina Cordoba. That's epic. I mean, like that's beyond like
for just sheer day trigger pulling
shooting
till
stuff
you drop. Yeah.
Great stuff. But, I mean, if you're a poor working guy, I can save you a lot on plane fare.
Well, people have asked me before, how have you been to Cordoba so many times and shot those numbers of birds and then get so excited about sitting out in a sweltering September 1 dove field to shoot 15? And I'm like, it's completely about context.
Yeah.
Because now look, if you like to pull the trigger, and I mean pull the trigger till your arm falls off, go to Mexico, go to Argentina, and have a great time. But at some point in time, to me, it ceases being enjoyable and it becomes more like work. Go lift a cold beer. Just lift your empty arm 1,500 times and tell me how that feels. Now imagine a 7-pound shotgun and pulling the trigger. At some point in time, after the first couple of hunts, it becomes work. Whereas going out and shooting 15 doves in a real and here in North America, here in the U.S., where we have a lot of dove like Yuma and Mississippi and Texas and other places, it is a huge social aspect. The grills, the cold beer. I've been to dove hunts that have live music in the evenings, and it's almost like a celebration.
It is.
of hunting. And I was talking to Matt McCormick up in Bozeman the other day, and most people, and I celebrate New Year's Eve like everybody else, but my official New Year starts Labor Day weekend. That's when hunting season starts.
Yeah.
And it starts with the dove hunt, and it runs, all the way through spring snow if you let it, or somewhere else, Mexico or something. But then you come into to fishing and golf or something and then boom, hunting season starts. My year starts with Labor Day, and it all centers around that Labor Day weekend. I'm glad I came to Arizona just to find out about Yuma, Arizona.
Yeah, honestly, I may seem a little biased and partial and all that stuff because I work for the state and all that, but like legitimately, there's cool stuff to be had here for sure. I mean, like I feel spoiled in a lot of respects of what I get to experience and do and all that. Basically, I hunted today in a t-shirt. A lot of the other I was just in northern Nevada last week, bird hunting up there, and I was bundled up from 6 ways to Sunday. But today I was like, okay, I was a little chilly down at the water, but hey, it warmed up and got comfortable. And
you're allowed to be biased because you're a small game manager, and you steer a lot of these programs here in Arizona. And to me, it really is important. Small. I mean, I know there's sexy big Boone and Crockett whitetail and sheep and elk and the true rock stars of the industry. In my world, beautiful ducks, which are small game. But when you really sit back and look at hunting overall, I would bet almost everybody listening is nodding their head going, yeah, I started with small game. I started with squirrels and rabbits and doves. And, it's a gateway.
Yeah.
It's warm. It's the perfect way to introduce young people into hunting. There's a lot of places to go almost for free, and small game hunters, public land opportunities. You just need a small game license, not a big game license or an auction tag. It's just a great way to get into hunting.
Well, let me. I want to just touch on something real quick for your listeners, okay? Because you and I, we all know who Ramsey Russell is. We've seen the highlight reels. He's been all over the world. I mean, like he's my hero. Like I want to go and hunt all these places he's done and the species and all that stuff. So there isn't a whole lot that Ramsey hasn't seen, and so here I am. I get this grand opportunity, which is kind of backwards. I think I figured I'd meet Ramsey because eventually I'd save up enough and he'd be taking me hunting like in Obregon or something like that. But I get the chance. He's coming and wanting to visit a bunch of states and hunting, and so here I if you were given the chance to take Ramsey Russell hunting for ducks, like where are you going to take him? And man, I struggled with this and. Because I was like, and I started to think about it. I said, he's seen the great flights. He's seen, probably some of the best spots in hunting all around the world. And I said, where am I going to take Ramsey that like really exemplifies Arizona? That kind of gives him a taste about it. Because we don't, not every day is a limit. It's not going to be full straps, And so to me, the place that I've taken them right here on the Salt River and right outside of Phoenix, it's not far away, and this is my home water. It's the quickest way for me to duck hunt. I can drive 30 minutes and boom, I'm there on the water. I can shoot a couple ducks for the very first early flight and still be back at work. And it's kind of my I've had great days. I've had not so great days, but it's my home water. It's like, okay, here's what it is. And it's open to public land. I mean, I can't tell you how many hunters from Phoenix know the Salt. Some of them love it. Some of them despise it. Some of them it's like, well, where should we go duck hunt tomorrow? Okay, we don't have a lot of time. Well, let's just go to the Salt. It's just a quick access point into that. And so, to me, I thought, that really was the best place to take Ramsey to see some Arizona duck hunting. There are a lot of cool places here in Arizona to hunt ducks, but this is what the regular guys do.
Yeah.
This is where the regular guys go, and this is what they're going to see, in terms of a species diversity and we didn't have Taj Mahal accommodations. It's
that's exactly how I hunt at home. I do hunt some private land at home, but I cut my teeth on public land. I do believe that public land hunting makes you, by necessity, a better hunter.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's just, and we do have some out of the water blinds there at camp, because a lot of people have children and stuff. But man, I'm just very comfortable sitting knee deep or waist deep in the bushes and hiding and just kind of immersing myself into the environment. That's what I'm used to.
Yeah.
And to me, that is that immersive experience is the experience. And I tell people all the time, you'll find out, I love to pull the trigger and shoot ducks. I love to shoot ducks, and but it's not the end all be all. John, the difference in 3 ducks and 7 ducks, or 6 ducks and 7 ducks, or whatever the limit may be in your area, it's just literally 3 or 4 or 5 dead ducks you can count on your fingers, and that really isn't the end all be all in terms of my experience and how I feel about the people I hunt with, or the hunt, or the environment. It's just the hand. I play an A game. You play an A game. I go out there and I do the best I can with what I've got to work with. And some days the duck wins, and I can accept that. It's the overall experience. And even when I started chasing real crazy species, bar-headed geese or red-crested poachers or whatever the case may be, it's really not about the species. I do want to lay my hands and reduce that bird to possession, but in hindsight 2020, it's not about that bird. It's about where on earth that bird took me.
Sure.
What I got to see and experience because of those birds. And that's just kind of how I process
Yeah,
that.
I think, fly fishermen for many
That's a fine
decades.
example.
Fly fishermen have really, when you read a lot of the books and literature about fly fishing and stuff, a lot of these guys really do talk about, I hate trout. I don't like trout. Mm-hmm. I love the places they live. Mm-hmm. And so, because the trout frustrate them and everything else, but they they love fly fishing. Trout frustrate the heck out of them, but they just are astonished by where that takes them. What canyon, what sights they get to see, and that's really the bottom line of duck hunting. I mean, as I've gotten older and thought about this, one of the most amazing parts of duck hunting to me, or any waterfowling, but I'm there to see the sunrise for another day. Sometimes I've even seen the sunsets on that same day. And I've done it in the company of really amazing people where we get to have, all kinds of talks, but we get to share in our successes. We get to laugh at our failures. And you get to talk about life.
Yeah, I'm not there just to watch the sunrise. Nobody hunting is. But I feel extremely blessed to be above ground and doing what I'm doing and standing where I'm standing with the people I'm with and get to experience that. I truly do. And getting back to fly fishing, I had this observation this summer. Did a little non-hunting related tour up through Montana, and we stopped somewhere to get gas and stretch our legs and air out a little bit, somewhere around the Madison River. And all up and down the river were fly fishermen. Some of them were just frothing the water, looked like they're throwing popping bugs out there for bluegills, and some of them were just very artistic. They were loading it up. They were casting these little 5-weights way out there. And as I just sat there watching them, backlit by the sun, and just sat there, I almost became hypnotized by the process of this one particular fisherman that was just drawing it. He'd get it out. He'd mend it. He'd start loading back up, start getting it going. And I sat there for 30 minutes, just stretching my legs and whatnot, but watching. Yeah. He never caught a fish. Yeah. He never got a strike. And really, I realized, it's for that guy sitting knee deep in that environment. He was in his happy place, and it was all about that ritual. Yeah. And I think, I understand young people, because I was there, man. I was trigger happy, bloodthirsty, and I'm not anymore. I've progressed. I've aged. I've changed. I've mellowed like a wine or something. And really and truly, to me, it's a higher level when it becomes more about the ritual and the process than just about the kill. Now, which leads me to another conversation with you. We were talking this morning about eating ducks.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't like to eat ducks.
That's right.
Why do you think that is?
probably the number one mistake that most home cooks make is overcooking. But not only ducks, but any game meat. And that really it pulls a strong flavor out of it. And to the American palate, the way we've kind of been conditioned over the past, 50 or more years, the domestic meats we eat, whether it's beef, pork, chicken, all that stuff, when you actually get down to the brass tacks of it, those meats are very bland. And they're all uniform. It's.
I guess we're talking fast food mostly.
Well, not only fast food, but stuff you get from the grocery. Like it's this weird thing that when you go to the store, every cucumber is roughly the same size and the same shape. You don't get heirloom tomatoes. You have to go to a farmer's market for. You can't get those. Go in and look at the Roma tomatoes at your local grocery store.
Oh yeah, it's like biting into plastic compared to homemade
tomatoes. Well, they're all
tomatoes,
identical. And it's the same with our meats. The chickens are raised to a specific age and then they're slaughtered. So every time, this is the reason why this is the reason why Gordon Ramsay can give you the perfect way to cook a steak. That it's whatever temperature, 3 minutes per side into the oven at whatever temperature for however long. It's because it's going to turn out the same every time. When we're out there and we're duck hunting, you might shoot a 1-year-old mallard. You might shoot an 8-year-old mallard. You might, where has that mallard been eating? Has he been feeding out of the cornfields? Has he been in the rice fields of California? Maybe he's been roughing it, somewhere out in the Great Basin Desert or something. All of those factors affect that animal. And so the one thing it is you can't almost cook every animal the same way.
No.
And for the same amount of time. I mean, that's the whole thing. You have to kind of, you not only do you have to understand that cut of meat or whatever, whether it's just a simple duck breast, but spend that time in the kitchen with it. One of the great examples for people who barbecue, they'll understand this completely. There's a thing that happens when you're barbecuing meat, that slow roast, that the meat all of a sudden hits a stall temperature as it's coming up, and it stays there for a while. For some unknown reason, and it'll sit there for a while, and eventually it kind of it just it gives up, and then the temperature finally rises to where you're trying to get it. And for barbecuers, that it makes total sense. And so sometimes that happens with wild game. I mean, you might have an 8-year-old mallard that's going to need a little bit extra time in the pot or in the oven until it finally becomes tender. Versus, something else. We were talking about squirrels earlier. Fried squirrel and gravy is the quintessential dish for squirrels. It's known the world over, I think. What no one tells you about that dish is that you need to use young of the year squirrels. If you've ever used old squirrels,
oh yeah,
but that's the one secret. Like every recipe I've said, every recipe I've ever seen for it never tells you use young of the year squirrels only. I've cooked it before and I've had old squirrels and I'm like, man, that stuff is like leather. It's not good. And so, yeah, I think, to really do quality things, you just have to take wild game's imperfect. It's an imperfect world with imperfect meat, that may take 5 minutes. It may take 15, you just have to really pay attention to it. I think a little bit more. But yeah, too many people, I think, the biggest mistake I always see is overcooking. With a duck, honestly, you really don't want to go more than about medium. Medium well would be almost too far.
One of the number one most complaints I hear of people that say they don't like duck is it tastes like liver. And that's usually a sign to me that they overcooked it.
Yeah, that strong flavor. But there's another aspect too. Because of how bland our palates have become with just the American diet, people now associate strong or different flavors with bad taste. That it tastes bad because it's strong or it's bold or, some of those things that aren't kind of normal. And that's not actually true. That's your tongue is reminding you what flavor is sometimes.
Sure. I think it's a very good point. I I may have talked about this before, but I love watching Andy Griffith. And one of the episodes, Aunt Bee was trying to put on airs and impress one of Opie's playmates, and Andy went through the roof when he realized he came home for lunch and she was cooking goose, because that was the creme de la creme impressive meal. That was the Christmas goose. And I'm thinking, man, that was back in the early '60s, and that was a symbol of really good eating, how on the hog to eat a goose. And since then, a couple of things have happened in America, and I'm just free streaming here, man. It's just interesting to me. But one, fast food proliferate.
Yeah.
The average guy eats fast food or sandwiches or something multiple times a week. And I read that Subway was banned in Italy because, based on an analysis, their bread did not even qualify as bread in Italy. It was sugar because of the sugar content.
Right.
And something else happened with the USDA food pyramid and healthy heart scheme and all this other BS. They started to remove fat from practically everything.
Yeah.
It's on all the packages, all the labels.
Yeah. Low fat, no fat.
And what they did is to give, with no fat, there's no flavor. So to give it flavor, they added sugar.
Sure.
It doesn't matter. Pick a product on an island. It yogurt or ice cream or hamburger, all this stuff. It's just sugar instead of fat. And
Sure.
I'm the complete opposite. I like meat and I love fat.
Sure.
And especially duck fat. And I just wonder if in the last several decades of this trend, if it's just somehow kind of sterilized Americans' taste buds.
Very possible. We certainly know that, table salt,
Yeah.
had to be iodized because it was chemically produced, and they added iodine because there wasn't enough iodine in our diet. Well, guess what? When you eat natural sea salt and those kind of, like the old ways we used to get salt, kind of the same thing. Why does bread have to be enriched?
I don't know.
Why does your sandwich loaves have to be an enriched form? Like, why isn't it naturally that way? Look at all the gluten allergies that are around now.
Exactly.
Gluten intolerance or gluten allergies and celiac disease and all that other stuff. One of the things they actually, I know that I don't know, for sure that this is the actual cause, but a lot of people blame industrialized bread making for removing the grains and the good parts, creating white bread.
Right.
Just doing that, removing those things that were important for us.
Well, it's got to sit on the store shelf for a month.
Yeah.
You go to some countries like Netherlands, you don't go to the grocery to get bread, you go to the baker.
Yeah.
You don't go to the grocery to get meat, you go to the butcher.
Yeah.
You don't go to the grocery to get cheese, you go to the cheese-making place, the dairy place. And they go buy bread by the day.
Yeah.
Good, fresh bread. Boom. The next day you need bread, you go buy bread. Just
Sure.
a little bit of bread for the day.
Well, yeah, that's the European model they go shopping every day.
Every day. Well, it makes a difference. The food is just unbelievable.
Yeah, for sure.
And
we've gotten away from that. We've become like, hoarders for, especially during this pandemic. You see it with toilet paper and other things. But it's like we hoard stuff at home to be able to feed us for a week or 2 weeks until the next paycheck or whatever. Like we've run out of time. In our daily lives to spend. Michael Pollan, who is a really incredible writer and thinker and talker on this subject. He talks about that. He says, you know what, you can eat all the junk food you want, but you got to make it all yourself. Mm-hmm. If you, literally
right.
Make everything. We've gotten so far away from cooking at home. Like the amount of time, I think he was talking about one time. He says, at one point, the average American family, a meal. The amount of time they spent eating was like 20 or 25 minutes.
Yeah.
Cleanup took 4 minutes. He's like, you can't do anything other than crush up a pizza box in 4 minutes when it comes to cleanup. If you've cooked your meal, like a good pot scrubbing and all those other things, and so there is a real big link to just health and well-being, mentally, physically, all those things. When you look at other countries who spend more time, at family units, cooking, that's the whole thing. You hear about Italian grandmothers.
Yeah.
They live in the kitchen. that's their home. It's the heart of their home, and people love to gather there and smell the smells and taste the tastes and kind of enjoy that stuff. And now it's okay. We got to grab McDonald's on our way to the soccer game, and I gotta go pick up Susie's medication, and whatever it is.
Eating has become a matter of convenience, and that's one thing I do like to cook. I do spend time at duck camps, and I'm not a chef. I've got a very small repertoire of recipes or dishes that I cook that I would describe as soul food or something, duck camp, deer camp food. But at home during COVID, my wife and I cooked a lot. We went through the freezer. We got backstrap. We got ducks. We got this. We got that. We made chili. We made gumbo. We didn't want to go out. We didn't want to go to the grocery. We didn't, we just very sparingly, and we started cooking a lot. And it was, and it wasn't a 30-minute process. It was, we sat at home and we chopped and we stirred and we cooked and we sauteed and we washed the pans and we loaded the dishwasher, and it might take an hour and a half, 2 hours.
Or you make plans for tomorrow night's dinner.
That's right.
Boy, we got to start this now if we're going to
that's
have
right.
this for
get
dinner
it
tomorrow.
going.
Make sure to pull it out of the freezer so it's thawed out so we can do this.
Exactly right. And I think there's a lot to be said. We both realized how much we had kind of missed that.
Yeah.
And it was, we did a lot of that in college. We were broke college kids. We didn't cook it. We couldn't afford it. And we did a lot of that back in our college days, and that's maybe where we learned to cook. And I guess I'm bringing this subject up because I do share. I think it's interesting to me. I like to eat duck.
Yeah.
And I spend so much time in duck camps around the world that I tend to eat duck a lot. Yeah. Around, it's not just a seasonal thing. It's all the time. If I'm gonna go to a foreign country, I want to eat duck. I want to eat duck like they cook duck. I want to eat the species they eat. I just want to sample. I want to experiment. Yeah. And I really do personally enjoy eating waterfowl, but only properly prepared waterfowl. I don't like eating overdone duck anywhere.
Well, one of the things that I've noticed as well, I mean, a lot of these, the famous or celebrity chefs and all that stuff, chefs for 5-star restaurants and James Beard winners and stuff, you listen to them in interviews, and every once in a while you'll catch it. Someone will ask them, if you could only pick, one thing to cook and eat for the rest of your life, what would it be? And I mean, I've heard it from people like Anthony Bourdain and all that. They all say duck.
Wow.
They legitimately, that duck is the pinnacle meat for them to prepare, because when it's done, properly or even close, it's amazing. It is a wonderful, wonderful thing. And that always kind of stuck with me, because that's the other thing, we talked about it earlier. What's funny, I think that a lot of Americans don't know or understand. I mean, market hunting in the latter half of the 1800s in America was for a reason. Mm-hmm. Most people in America were eating game. It was the most prized thing. Like, people weren't going to the market to get cows and chickens. Like, if you lived on a farm, you had some, and maybe that would supplement because you had other things going on. Like, oh, well, we're going to have to kill some chickens because, we didn't get deer this year. Or whatever, but people went out to eat wild game. Mm-hmm. They went to the Waldorf Astoria in New York City. They went to high-end restaurant. I mean, the reason why market gunners were paid a good, deal was because people were in search of these meats, those wild game, whether bison, ducks, you name it. And conservation comes in and changes the game and makes that illegal. So now the only way to get the best quality meat that even chefs today say, this is what I want to cook for the rest of my life if I only have one choice, is to be a hunter. The only way you're going to get wild duck, very few exceptions like wild salmon or something like that are brought to market. Mm-hmm. The rest of it, you have to be a hunter to acquire this meat. You cannot buy it no matter how much money you have in your... No, Warren Buffett cannot buy wild elk. They can't buy Ramsey's wild ducks.
No.
He has to go buy a shotgun and buy some waders and show up in the duck blind with you to get it. And to me, that's a very amazing, kind of aspect that I think gets overlooked by us hunters as well. Like we're eating like kings, mm-hmm. And,
I mean, you were saying earlier this morning some of the most expensive meats at the Waldorf Astoria were wildlife. Buffalo tongue.
The most expensive meal in America ever served was a half a roasted rare canvasback duck.
Wow.
The Waldorf Astoria was it was $18.95, and I mean it was a week's worth of wages just to buy half of a roasted duck.
2 weeks' wages for you and your wife to each have a half a duck.
Yeah, you were gonna have to work 2 whole weeks. Imagine a meal today. Whatever job you have, and that was actually I think that was a carpenter's wages in New York City at the time. So let's say you're a tradesman or whatever it is. I want you to imagine having to work 2 full weeks and taking that paycheck just to take your wife out to one dinner, and all it was half a duck.
I hope my wife's listening to this, so next anniversary when I roast a mallard or canvasback duck, she'll appreciate
it. Sure.
There you go, baby.
I mean, it's astonishing, but these kind of things are important. I mean, to know and understand about the history and where we come from and all that stuff. I mean, yeah, wild canvasback ducks from the interior of the country, still to this day are some of the most fantastic tasting birds I think I've ever experienced. They eat wild celery on the breeding grounds, and I always joke that maybe that's like pre-stuffing your duck.
But the flavor is truly in the fat, and I breast, peel back the skin, breast a lot of ducks, make a lot of dishes like that. It's convenient. We do shoot a lot of ducks at times, but really and truly the better quality ducks, the teal, the canvasbacks, the mallards, the pintails, the widgeons, I like to whole pick those birds. I like those birds whole picked. I want that fat, and at a minimum, I'm going to pluck the breast and keep that fat intact, because the recipes I like to cook, that fat. When I make a gumbo, it's not duck meat that goes in there. It's the duck and the fat and the whole base of the roux, the stock. It's got that fat in it, that rendered fat, and to me, that just gives it a sublime flavor. Yeah. That's the starting point of a great meal. It's the flavors in the fat. And I guess I'm turning this kind of into a cooking episode, and I hope everybody's enjoying it. But I guess I am, because I get a lot of inboxes and texts. I've gotten some emails the last couple of weeks about certain recipes or certain things I've posted up about cooking, and and I believe that I believe it's a proper tribute to properly cook wild game. That's why we hunt it. I know we hunt it for fun, but I think we do hunt ducks, and everybody ought to have at least one really, really good duck recipe.
Oh, yeah.
At least one. Yeah. We ought to have several, but there ought to be at least one that anybody will like. I think it's just a proper tribute to it. But, it's like I was describing to somebody the other day. I said, I get so many of these inboxes about some basic things, and it's like I don't know that it's not that people don't know how to cook duck. It's that maybe they just it's cooking itself is becoming kind of a lost art, and if you're used to throwing a frozen pizza on 350 for 18 minutes, to go from there to properly cooking duck is a quantum leap.
Sure.
Start with something basic like steak, but I mean, it's a quantum leap.
Yeah.
And so when we started talking about cooking this morning, I said, what? I'm gonna ask this guy about this, because it's a great topic.
Yeah.
What is your favorite way to eat duck?
Okay, hands down. So I haven't traveled to as many countries as you have, Ramsey, but I feel kind of rather worldly.
That's right.
I've traveled internationally and done some stuff, and actually took cooking classes in a number of countries like Tokyo and Paris and all that other stuff. And I will say that one of the things to me for duck that ducks and geese that are just kind of, it's always been my favorite, has been confit duck legs or confit goose legs.
Oh boy, that sounds good. What is it?
And so what that is, and it relates to your topic about fat. So what it is skin on legs that are cooked in duck fat, completely submerged in duck fat. It's a French technique. You cook it at very low temperatures for a few hours, and it becomes just, mouth-wateringly, it just melts in your mouth.
So I take my skin on duck legs and I put them in a pan, And I fill it up with duck fat.
They got to be covered. And usually what I add to it as well is I'll add shallots. I'll slice up some shallots, and I'll actually cut up some or just open up garlic bulbs to help season that fat, because you're going to use this fat multiple times. It's not just you don't throw it away after you're done. But it sits in a very low temperature oven, 200 degrees. So you're not boiling the fat. This is just a real slow cook, and it just breaks everything down into this beautiful. It becomes ultra soft and tender. And usually, actually, what happens beforehand is a curing process. So you cover that leg or that piece with some salt and some different herbs and spices and all that stuff, and let it sit in that usually overnight so that it soaks in before that cooking process takes place. It's an old preservation technique. So people would do this. They'd confit it, and then they'd put it in jars, and then they would cover it with fat and allow it to come to room temperature, because that fat would create a seal and protect it from rotting, from decaying. And so at any time, you always had confit, duck or goose legs laying around. Now, when you're ready to eat it, you pull it out of that fat, you get a pan searing hot, and you lay it in that pan and you crisp up that skin. Just on that, you're not worried about cooking because it's already fully cooked, that meat. What you're trying to do is crisp up that skin, serve it with some roasted potatoes or something, and it's delicious.
Crisp it under an oven or in a skillet?
I usually do it on a skillet. I think some people have done it in an oven before. Goose legs are really good for it because there's a whole lot of meat. Domestic ducks have way bigger legs than wild, and so duck legs tend to be a little bit different. But I've confit a lot of. I usually get a pile of duck legs. I just save like all my legs from any ducks that like you were talking about. You breast out. I get mad at my friends who breast out birds. I'm like, you say, I'm watching them rip out breasts. I said, put that duck right here. I said, as soon as you're done taking those breasts, I'm taking every one of these legs, and I'll build a whole bunch of them. Just keep them in the freezer until the end of season, and then I'll do like some confit, and I've used that as taco filling. Just after the cook, I just shred it and beautifully seasoned, throw it in some tacos. It's just got a lot of multi-purpose things that it can be used for. But when you have it perfect, I've eaten it in Paris several times. A lot of places, like I said, that a beautifully crisped, buttery, tender, soft. Meat. There's nothing like it in the world. Like,
so you can cook a lot of them and then store them and then bring them out later after they've been confit and just brown up the skin and enjoy them.
Yeah, or even like I said, even if you don't have the skin, a lot of times the ducks that I end up using don't have the skin on them.
Okay.
And so what I'll do is,
still use that duck fat.
I'll do the confit, and I'll because it's usually so tender. As soon as they come out of the confit, I'll just strip it off the bone, because no sense, and just really stack in a mason jar, and then cover the top with some of that fat, and then I can just store it in the fridge, and it's just there, just ready to go anytime. And I can just pull it out, and I love to reheat it and crisp it up in a pan. Like I said, all that nice shredded meat, crisp it up in a pan. Add some seasonings, throw on some cilantro, some onions and stuff. You have great tacos. I make probably my favorite sauce. This is I'll give you the secret trick to John Odell's ultimate confit duck tacos right here.
All right.
So you now know how to confit, and you've got all that confit meat. What I do is I take flour tortillas, and I use a muffin tin upside down, and I put the taco the soft flour tortillas in between the things, so they're kind of like they're looking like a taco.
Yeah,
it's making a taco, in there. And I bake them in the oven at about 350 until they brown and crisp up, because I want that flour tortilla crispy. I put in that duck meat, and I make this sauce. And just like you, it's kind of soul food. It's how you feel when you're cooking it, because there isn't a specific recipe. What I use is fig preserves.
Oh boy!
And I use a canned chipotle pepper or two, just to give it a little bit of spice. Throw it in the food processor, blend it up. I want it real fine, and pull it out, squeeze it up over that duck taco meat. Add any other toppings you want, and just absolutely delicious. They're superb tacos. Everyone who tries them, I'm always, they're always like, that just tastes like magic in my mouth, and it really does. And if you add more chipotle pepper, it can get spicier. If you don't, you want a little bit of that sweet side with that fig. It's fantastic.
You had an interesting philosophy. You've got an interesting philosophy on when cooking. We were talking about our friend Hank Shaw today.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And several other chefs. And you had an interesting philosophy on when that chefdom and that elevation of cooking kind of became prevalent among a lot of people in America.
Yeah, so a lot of the new hunters, the new guys coming into hunting,
right,
have a real strong cooking ethic.
Exactly,
like they're
yes.
they're willing to put in a lot of work for a meal that I think a lot of older hunters who maybe don't have those kitchen skills or don't have, they don't feel as comfortable in the kitchen as a lot of these younger millennials and stuff coming in. And what I noticed that happened was the reason why the turning point in everything was September 11th, 2001.
Mm-hmm.
So, we all know Twin Towers came down, the terrorist attack happened, and hit the Pentagon and all that other stuff. How that translates to food is an actually interesting story because for those who were there and remember that time period, it was a scary time, like everyone was just kind of on edge, like, was there going to be another one? America was pulling together. It was really great, but people really, the news kind of got overwhelming because we were just glued to our TVs every day. What's the new threat level? What's happening at Ground Zero cleanup? What, are they finding any people or, what are we learning about these terrorists and stuff? And people just really at some point had to tune out just for their own mental sanity. And what they did is they actually tuned into the only channel that wasn't about bad news or any of that other stuff, and it was Food Network. Mm-hmm. You actually can see, if you look at the TV ratings for Food Network right after 9/11, about 2 weeks afterwards, the network ratings started to climb as people started tuning into this, which is understandable. Like there's only so much bad news you could take or feeling, scared and you don't know what's going on. But a lot of these were parents protecting their children,
sure,
from all this bad news, and because that's all that was on the news at that time.
Scary.
It was all that was on the TV. And so you have an entire generation of kids who came up literally glued to Food Network. And if you really think about it, we didn't have celebrity really the first early celebrity chefs that I knew of was like Julia Child.
Yeah.
Who was on
Martha
TV
Stewart.
And all that other stuff. But then there's this explosion of all, like, there's Rachel Ray and Bobby Flay.
Chopped.
Now there's like we know a ton of chefs' names. Like, where I don't think my parents knew anybody but Julia Child as far as a cook,
Paul Perdone.
And so that happened because of this whole, drive to Food Network and all that stuff. So there's a bunch of kids and now adults who are trying to come at, where's my food coming from? And they want to make better decisions about, if they're going to eat meat, they want to be able to make sure it's the most ethical meat they can. And so they are coming to hunting from a food side. And they're willing to put in extra effort into their meals. So they're learning better cooking techniques and all that stuff instead of just the old school, Campbell's cream of mushroom soup or maybe marinating it in Italian dressing or something like that. I mean, they're really doing some high-end cooking. And it all stemmed from September 11th, changing the way we watch TV or as kids and stuff and really coming up. And so I've often been very, very impressed with their willingness to really invest themselves into ingredients and into learning things to be able to cook better. Mm-hmm. And that's, we talked about, with Hank. Hank, was a trained chef. I mean, he started in an Ethiopian restaurant, worked his way up into sous chef and really has those abilities and skills. Mm-hmm. And you can see it in his recipes. I mean, because I know people who I've introduced to Hank in the whole wild game cooking world, they'll look in that book and they see a list of there's ingredients there that they have never heard of in their life.
Right.
Or never even thought about. And that, what's going on. I actually had a boss who, when he first started with me, I introduced him to the wild game cooking world, which was really kind of fun because it totally foreign to him. He didn't have a whole lot of kitchen skills. He can cook, decent quail and stuff like that. He does okay, but he's like, oh, okay, this is a whole different level. And so, I said, if you're just willing to trust me. So he bought buck moose and all the deer and venison stuff, and literally started going recipe by recipe through there. And he said his only complaint was that there were some recipes that had an ingredient that that's the only time he's ever used that ingredient. And so he has to wait till he cooks that dish again. But he was very impressed that he could do that with wild game. I mean, he had no clue that he could make it taste that much better, just by going through that. And Hank, to his credit, Hank's recipes can seem very complicated and require a lot of time and all that stuff. But every one of them has been tested by people who don't have, chef level, Gordon Ramsay level skills. Mm-hmm. You don't have to be master chef material to make these, if you literally follow, his advice, he offers tips in there. Maybe you don't have this ingredient, you have to substitute something else. We were talking about it today, my favorite thing is instead of in Kraft macaroni and cheese, substitute duck fat for your butter once.
Oh, boy.
Just make Kraft macaroni and cheese and put duck fat instead of butter in there. Game changer.
Duck fat is the food of God. Also, roasted potatoes with duck fat.
Yeah, any potato, any starch cooked in duck fat is superior.
And a recipe that I don't yet have, but I will hopefully meet Hank maybe this January, and I'm going to hit him dead up for this, is his wife Holly was telling me one time about, 'cause I love eggnog, especially with bourbon, and but he uses duck fat to make his, and I'm thinking, okay, that is just taking it to a whole holy level. If you've got eggnog with duck fat in it, I've got to get this recipe.
Yeah, that's Hank and I are definitely big fans. I've known him for several years now, and we really do talk about our love of using duck fat in our cooking as a fat, because fat isn't bad for you. Like fat is actually necessary. We actually do require animal fat as human beings in some form or fashion. And, for a long time we've gotten away from it, where you have, vegetable oils and Crisco. I mean, they're substitutes. They're not, the real thing. I mean,
right.
we as an individual species, we're meant to eat animals and have some of that fat.
They don't have the flavor, or the vegetable oils don't have the flavor or the nutrition of animal fat.
Yeah, no. Actually, I know the BBC, the British Broadcasting Company, published an article and actually noted pork fat lard is one of the top 10 most nutritious ingredients on the planet in terms of what your body gets from it, from eating it. When you talk about, caloric intake, amino acids, anything, it is it is in the top 10 of the list.
Well, that makes bacon right on time then.
Yeah.
And I like bacon.
Bacon is super good.
I doing this road trip, I was just staying with a close friend of mine, and we went to go cook some stuff. I go, where's your bacon grease? They go, huh? I go, who doesn't have bacon grease in their kitchen?
Yeah.
Coffee can of it. I mean, you don't get rid of bacon grease. It is the basis of nearly everything I cook.
Yeah, and I think part of that though, there's a definite Southern heritage.
There's a Southern heritage
with having bacon fat on your thing, and maybe even an older generation whole thing. I remember bacon fat always being on our stove there in Montana too, my grandmother's stove, my mom's stove. It was always there and needed.
That's right.
Well,
it's needed for practically everything in my repertoire of cooking requires, or I want, bacon grease. Maybe a tablespoon, maybe more. It's a flavor. It's a grease. It's the secret to cornbread. It's just got to have bacon grease in my world.
Oh yeah, for sure. There's a lot of fat. I mean, that's the great part is if you can do one thing cooking wise, if you want to experiment and understand, just a little bit more about cooking or whatever, do fat substitutions. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, it's something easy to try. Instead of butter, use vegetable oil sometime, or maybe use olive oil, or use duck fat, or use chicken fat, or use beef tallow, or whatever it is. Like I said, just substituting duck fat for butter in Kraft macaroni and cheese, blue box Kraft macaroni and cheese. I guarantee every kid in America has had it at least once. Mm-hmm. As a grown up, you will enjoy Kraft macaroni and cheese with that duck fat. I mean, it's a game changer, and so have those things where you do, all kinds of, God, butter, having real butter again.
Oh, I
instead of
margarine in decade.
Yeah. Salted butter, unsalted butter. I mean, if you can understand that one area, your cooking will improve.
That's right.
You'll develop taste for things. I think that's where Hank and I kind of sit, and probably you as well. Like, Hank and I sit there, and duck fat is a major like, I cook some chicken recipes with duck fat, and people look at me like, you're doing what? I'm like, yeah, I'm putting duck fat in my chicken recipe. That's a personal flavor profile for me that it gives it a depth and a richness, and I just love it. It's it's a versatile ingredient, and the fact that I can collect it my own in the wild as a side effect of duck hunting. Mm-hmm. I am grocery shopping. Not that that's what it should be boiled down to, but by God, I'm going to get a great duck.
It's a great
something to
eat,
but I'm going to, I'm also, I get a little bit of duck fat off a lot of ducks that I can render their fat off of. So,
folks, the flavor is in the fat. I'm going to change subject while I got you, John. And
sure.
I know it's getting late, but I wanted to ask you about your involvement. Complete change of subject. But I wanted to ask you about your involvement in the Pacific Flyway waterfowl management stuff. What is your role? Because I know I don't completely understand, and I'm thinking maybe a lot of my listeners don't understand about how the season that they see expressed on the back of their bag limit card comes into being.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And I know you're very, very instrumental. I know it takes up a lot of your time on the Flyway Council, Flyway Committee.
Yep.
What's all that about?
So basically, we have the 4 flyways. You have the Pacific, Central, Mississippi, and Atlantic. We're all basically structured the same. So what you'll hear is you'll hear different levels. You'll hear council. Council is the top level. Mm-hmm. For the states, and the people who are on the councils, every state typically is represented, in a council, and for their respective flyways. So, like my boss, who's the terrestrial wildlife chief, is my council member. He's the one that does the final voting and all those other things. Okay. And
he's the delegate of politics.
Because what you have to understand, these decisions can be policy level decisions for an agency, and so I'm a step under him, where I'm the Migratory Game Bird Coordinator, the waterfowl biologist. I mean, you have a representative for each of your states that is that person, and what we do is we're the science arm. So our job is to dig into the science and the numbers, the population counts, the surveys. We coordinate a lot of things within our own respective states, but then amongst other states as well. And so we develop the recommendations based on the direction of our agency. Like when I go, I'm the representative for Arizona. So when I sit in the room with the 11 Western states and the Canadian Wildlife Service and US Fish and Wildlife Service, I have a responsibility to my state, and my hunters and what's best for them. But I have other responsibilities to, neighboring states, regional, the flyway. We're one unit. We have to operate that way. I have to look out for my hunters, but I also have to look out for my flyway. And then I also have to look out internationally. Mm-hmm.
Because the Pacific Flyway, y'all are like the only flyway that does have to coordinate with other countries.
All the other flyways, have to coordinate with Canada, and we do have some back and forth with Mexico. But the Pacific is unique because we also it's the Pacific Rim. I mean, we get birds from Alaska that go over onto the Asian continent, fly down all the way to China, Japan, those kind of things. But we have partners from other countries. Vasily, who's our Russian counterpart, who works on snow geese issues on Wrangel Island in the Arctic Circle, an island there, a Russian-owned island where snow geese breed and grow and stuff. Some of those birds come to the United States. Some of those birds also stay on that side. And you know, we have to work with him. He does an awesome job, you know, working on the island for a few months every year. And so he has to, you know, kind of relay information to us, what he thinks is going on. Because, you know, we all know we've got a real, you know, burgeoning snow goose population, in a lot of the country. The Pacific has kind of not seen the brunt of it like the Mississippi or, you know, the Central has, at this point. And so we've kind of learned along the way, you know, how to better manage and stuff, and take advice, you know, of what's coming and what to watch out for. And, but we have complications, you know. Japan would like snow geese returning regularly and in good numbers. And some of those birds come from Wrangell Island, but a lot of those Wrangell Island birds end up in Central Valley, California.
Wow.
And you know, boy, you want to talk about some eaters. Snow geese will eat you out of house and home.
Oh, yeah.
But they, you know, large snow goose populations also have impacts on ducks and where they're wintering and their food resources. And so there's a balancing act, you know. You know, some people are under the misconception that you know, some species can be unlimited. You know, that you can never have enough. Well, actually, no, that's not true. There are a number of species that you know, originally, you know, when America was worried about, you know, we got to bring them back, we got to restore them, they set floors, you know, like pie in the sky goals to, if we could just get the population above here, you know, we'd feel good about it, or any of that other stuff. And then the reverse happened. Like, they reached that goal, which is awesome. I mean, we're all standing on the shoulders of those giants who came before us. And now new issues arise. You know, we see it with the Rocky Mountain population of sandhill cranes. The guys couldn't even imagine having cranes at over 17,000. Just that population, 17,000 birds. That's not much in terms of you know, when we talk about, you know, duck number, like 17 million, you know, of mallards and things like that. I mean, we're just talking 17,000. And all of a sudden new issues started to crop up, because once we started getting too high, about 21,000, in the breeding grounds, they were actually destroying farm fields in Idaho. And you know, this is nuisance issues and issues that we have to solve. And so, you know, we set a cap, a ceiling now of, like, we don't want the population over 21,000. And when it is, we've set triggers in place for us to respond and increase our harvests to bring that number back down into alignment where, you know, we're not destroying someone's livelihood, you know, with cranes eating up, you know, their farm fields and all that stuff, the local family farm, but also, you know, kind of meeting those issues back and forth. But the thing that you have to understand is that, you know, the flyways are all interconnected. All of the states are interconnected through the flyway system. And it's a system that works. You know, we're all 50 individual states collectively working regionally, you know, flyway wide and those kind of things, but also nationally, and working with the Fish and Wildlife Service to make things happen. And there's a process there. And really, we do use the best science available to make decisions on how we do stuff. And so, you know, like if you're mad that gosh dang it, you know, like, I can't believe, you know, the bag limit for this species is this, or you know, I'd like to hunt till February 10th, or, you know, whatever it is, like, it isn't just your state that can make that happen, or that it only affects them. It affects all of us. You know, like, you have to go outside those bounds and think at a larger scale, because
the continental population of waterfowl and their management is a lot bigger than your home state.
Yeah.
And you know, we talked about this briefly this morning. I can remember back when Trent Lott was in power. Bill Clinton was in office, and all the southern duck hunters wanted an extension. I think the season ended around January 15th or 17th or something like that. We all wanted an extension. The ducks didn't show up till after the season.
Right.
We needed 2 more weeks. We needed to go longer.
Yep.
And through some political crafting, if I remember correctly, he actually got that extension written into the national budget.
Yeah.
And as a piece of pork. And, you know, that was 20 some odd years ago.
Yep. And that's
And
probably,
to me, looking back, I was young. I was trigger happy. I wanted to shoot more ducks. I wanted a longer season. The ducks didn't show up, I felt like. But now what I've learned after all these years, it was a mistake. In my humble opinion, it was a mistake.
Yeah.
But because I have witnessed very, very, very little marginal return on that extension. I see mallards pair bonding, and when I see strong pair bond formations, and when you see pairs of mallards that are indifferent, that's because they've moved on to another life cycle. They don't want to be around a bunch of decoys. They don't want to hang out with a bunch of guys. They want to go off and do ducky things, kind of hold hands and kiss and start courting each other. And at some point in time, my thought has evolved to where I'm thinking that's 2 weeks that the ducks can have. Instead of me out there frustrating myself with stale ducks, with pressured ducks, with ducks that are entering a new phase of their life cycle requirement, maybe I need to go on snow goose hunting or go do something else or get on with my fishing season and let the ducks be ducks and make more ducks. And that's just my 2 cents on kind of what you're saying.
And yeah, for sure. I mean,
because after that happened, now the northern states got longer seasons. The western states, everybody's got more seasons.
Sure.
And, any biologist will tell you bag limits don't kill ducks. Days kill ducks.
Absolutely. That is the number one. The more days that you spend, the more ducks will die.
That's right.
And it's seen over and over again. But you bring up an important point. The fact that it was political and then it came from Congress in those changes, this is where things get really tricky. People want it and they want it now. We've kind of been spoiled in that. And like I said, the flyway is a process. I mean, you're talking about coordinating 50 individual states and the Fish and Wildlife Service all getting on the same page about something. Some states take more convincing than others, and granted, it comes down to votes and you might, it could be in the Pacific, it could be a 6-5 vote. 6 states approve, 5 against, and those are just kind of the way that the things roll on some issues. But saying that, like, what you need to be concerned about more is when it gets political like that and it gets into Congress. Because anytime Congress opens the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, forcing changes, if the science tells us, like right now, the season for ducks ends January 31st. That's the latest we can possibly go. Because of what happened with the Land Act that just recently passed. There was a piece of legislation attached into the Land Act, and they used kind of veterans as cannon fodder in that to get senators to vote for it when it was on its own, and all of a sudden, and then it got wrapped into the Land Act, and the Land Act was really good. It just, it had this one kind of hitch in it about extending us to the 31st. Well, the problem with that piece of legislation going through is because Congress got involved and did that, instead of allowing the flyways a little more time, because we actually all of us didn't have a problem with going to the 31st at all. What we wanted was something to be able to justify doing it. Even if it was just an opinion survey of hunters. If a couple states had done a survey of their hunters that said, yes, we would like to go to the 31st instead of ending the last Sunday in January like we have, so that way we get a few extra days, that would have been sufficient enough for us to justify and say, yep, okay, we can do that, because a couple days either way wasn't going to destroy all ducks in North America. But Congress got involved in the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, and it became a law. So now, if the science tells us that we should or could, push duck season into February now, it now requires an act of Congress to change that season. Instead of allowing the states the authority and the power that they have in the relationship and the working relationship we have with each other and Fish and Wildlife Service, who could have just changed it without any fanfare, or any problems. We now have to, if we want to make that change, okay, here, we make all this justification. We now have to take it to Congress.
Yeah. Well, good luck with that if they've got budget or
and
anything else.
We may not be high priority for that, and so it's tough. Obviously, I think a lot of us aren't aren't particularly fond of politics and those kind of things. And I just want them I want politicians as far away from our regulation process as possible. We know they probably don't do some of the greatest things with other stuff, but like that's really the blessing of wildlife management. I mean, that we use science. Science guides us and tells us, what to do. So that way it's more of an objective marker in how we manage, waterfowl and wildlife in general. Cause it shouldn't be political. Wildlife shouldn't be attached to a party. This is America's wild. It's everybody. Everyone should care. Everyone should have, a part or a role in it. And really, because it is for everyone.
Right.
And when we talk about, it's an international resource, we have sandhill cranes, who are probably here in the state of Arizona right now, who came from Siberia, flew all the way across the Bering Strait, Alaska, Canada, all the way down and ended up in southern Arizona. And so that bird has some importance, not only here just Arizona, but the breeding grounds, everything else. And we just have to be mindful of that because their borders don't matter to them.
There's no fence in the sky.
No, there
no
really isn't.
There's no customs in the sky.
No.
They just fly.
No, they're coming and so I think, for your listeners and stuff to understand, we really, I can't tell you, I'm my counterparts in the flyways are rock stars. Like some of the most amazing people. And we all have kind of our own interests and specialties, or even responsibilities, as it were, and so we all have to kind of come from, we have a lot of strengths that come together in this world. I mean, managing Central Valley, California, is a whole heck of a lot different than managing Arizona. And in particular species, doves are really, really high on my priority list. Like I said, it's my Super Bowl.
Sure.
California, gosh, you want to talk about someone who's neck deep in pintails. Like their finger is on the pulse of what's going on in pintails constantly. I saw one. I drove through Central California a few years ago. I was on my way to the waterfowl wing bee. I was up near Redding, and there was just a big. I think it was up by Sacramento Wildlife Refuge or something. There was a big kind of pond off on the side of the freeway. And I swear to you, there was a raft of pintails on this pond lake looking thing that was more pintails than I have seen doing waterfowl surveys in the state of Arizona for 20 years. Like there were more birds in one single raft of ducks. I was just I'm like, oh my Lord, and so, heck, Alaska, I mean, how could you pick any two more completely diametrically opposed states than Alaska and Arizona? And we're in the same flyway.
That's right.
And I talk about doves and their eyes roll because they don't have any doves. And they start talking about, sea ducks and stuff. And I'm like, I don't even know, like, what are those, but we have to work together and jointly, and we do, and it's fantastic that we can do that and talk over issues and we help each other out in this process and try to make, all of us are on the hunter side without question. We want there to be, as we talked about earlier, the difference between big game and small game management, or even specifically migratory birds. Big game management is actually managing the animals. You have a count of how many bulls and cows, bucks and does, and the birth rates and death rates and so like particularly here in the West where we have a lottery system because our resources is more restricted. Like we know how many we're supposed to take out and keeping this population at $30 per 100 does or whatever it is. In small game and migratory. The migratory bird world, you're not, while we are managing those species to an extent, more of what we're doing is managing hunters' expectations and behavior, and experiences in the field. And that's where, bag limits and season dates and those kind of things, like we understand, like we want you to have a good time. We, at the same time, like it's our job to protect resources, and abide by these agreements that, several states have signed and glommed onto, management plans and all that stuff. And that's why you see some of these, certain duck species have sublimits within a bigger limit. Here in the Pacific, we've got a 7 duck bag limit, but there's always a kerfuffle about, being at a 2 bag limit for pintail versus a 1. And a lot of discussion that you've heard recently about, requesting to go to 3 pintails, in terms of that bag limit and all that other stuff. And these are things like all of us agree to, as far as working and I would just say, really the process does work. Sometimes as an outsider, you may not understand or what's going on, but I can tell you, every one of your science representatives, the working guys and gals who make up these flyway technical committees and study committees and stuff, really are just some of the best, people in those positions and have a lot of strengths and are on the hunter side, without a doubt.
I was asked by Steve Ranella, that, having traveled and been a part of, hunting in a lot of different countries and whatnot, he said, he asked the question, did anybody manage waterfowl like we did here in America? Did anybody do a better job? And unequivocally, no.
Yeah.
But it's the federal government coordinating with the state government, but also it's about, to me, there's the state, there's the federal, and there's the NGOs, and there's also the hunters.
Yeah.
All 4 pillars working together as a team.
Oh, absolutely.
And I do see it some in other countries, but not at the level that we do it.
No.
It takes what they say, it takes a community to raise a child. There's a lot of the same thing when we start talking about a continental resource like waterfowl.
Well, and you've been around the world, and seen these places and these birds and all that other stuff. The North American waterfowl factory that we have of producing waterfowl is pretty epically amazing.
Right.
The prairie potholes, I would say, rival, in a different way, like the Serengeti. The breadbasket of these mass migrations and the numbers that are put. I mean, like, it's unfathomable what North America produces in terms of bird numbers.
Right.
To have what we have and see what we see. I mean, the numbers are phenomenal. We're at some of the highest numbers, we've recorded in waterfowl since they started collecting the information. I think the low they estimated was like 1924 or something like that, right around the time when the duck stamp was developed.
That's
the
right.
Federal duck stamp and where we started buying refuges and stuff. And it's come roaring back in amazing ways. And not every species is doing as well as maybe they were in the past or, where we think they could be. But gosh dang, like it's a great time to be a waterfowler. I don't know that there's been a better time, to be a waterfowler in the United States. Probably even rivals the market gunning days. Obviously things have changed and shifted, but man, I mean, like, there still are these beautiful special places, around you've gotten to see them and stuff like that. And they're all places that, we've all heard about that, maybe you'd like to visit someday or see someday. You've got Stuttgart, Arkansas, you've got Central Valley, California, you've got, Chesapeake Bay, you've got, just fantastic stuff.
The world is full of tremendous duck hunting destinations, but we in America are wickedly blessed.
Yeah. But you know what? There's
we truly are. You really I've come to the conclusion I can probably hunt, travel like I'm doing now, doing these road trips, and never fully experience all of American waterfowling opportunities.
Yeah.
But anyway, folks, y'all have been listening to my friend John Odell, Arizona Department of Natural Resources, Migratory Game Bird Coordinator and my host here in Arizona. John, what are we going to do tomorrow morning?
We're going duck hunting again.
Okay. Okay. Y'all tuned in. Road trip continues. The road goes on forever and the party never ends. I'll see y'all next week. Thank y'all for listening.